Welcome to Psyche Talks. Okay, picture this. You walk into like a lab setting, just a plain room, and there are two people in there, maybe looking a bit awkward, and you've got zero info on them. Nothing. No job title, no background, nothing. How could you possibly tell which one is the person who's really good at connecting with others? The one who makes people feel great?
Yeah, it sounds like a total guessing game,
Sure.
especially when you take away all the usual stuff we look for. But that's kind of what this deep dive is all about. We're digging into some really fascinating source material that explores these subtle ways people build rapport, sometimes without even realizing it.
Exactly. And our mission today is to really unpack that source material you shared. We want to pull out the core concepts, sure, but also those practical, sometimes kind of surprising little tricks it talks about. Think of it like getting a peek behind the curtain to see how instant connections are actually made, using the insights directly from this material.
Right. And going back to that lab scenario, the source material tells us the key wasn't anything obvious like clothes or status. It was all about how they reacted, their sensitivity to how others were feeling in that uncomfortable situation.
Okay, so what happened? How did they react differently?
Well, one person apparently turned to the other guy, sensed he was feeling awkward, and said something like, "Phew, bet you're glad that's over, Joe. You handled that well."
Hmm.
But they didn't stop there. They also acknowledged the researchers, saying something like, "I imagine that was probably a bit uncomfortable for you folks too. Hope the next part's easier. You must be doing some important work here."
Wow. Okay. That's quite considerate. What did the other person do?
The source says they just kind of mumbled, "Glad I could help," grabbed their payment, and basically focused on getting out. The difference is huge, isn't it? The first person was actively predicting the discomfort the other participants, the researchers, and then acted specifically to make everyone feel a bit better, to boost their self-esteem. They were reading and responding to the emotions.
Okay, right. And this is where the source introduces a specific term for this, doesn't it?
Yes, it calls it emotional prediction, or EP for short. It's described as this ability to anticipate how someone else is likely going to feel based on what you're about to say or do before you actually do it.
And then adjusting based on that prediction.
That's the crucial part. You predict the feeling, and then you tweak your behavior, your words, your actions, specifically to enhance their self-esteem, to make them feel good about themselves.
So it's related to emotional intelligence, but slightly different.
Yeah, the source presents it as maybe a specific layer within EI, or complementary to it. While EI often involves reading current emotions, EP is very focused on predicting the future emotional impact of your behavior on someone else. And the goal isn't just, generic niceness. It's about subtly making people feel good about themselves when they're interacting with you.
Huh. So it's less about how do they feel right now and more like how will what I do next make them feel? And then using that foresight. That's really interesting. And these aren't like grand sweeping gestures you're talking about. The source calls them little tricks, right?
Exactly. Little tricks, often subtle, sometimes even counterintuitive things. And the source material dives into a whole bunch of these practical ways you can apply this emotional prediction principle.
Okay, cool. Let's get into some of those specifics then. Moving from the big idea to the actual techniques, where should we start? First impressions seem key.
Definitely. Let's talk physical first impressions. Handshakes are obvious, but this source has a unique angle I hadn't encountered before.
Oh, yeah. What's the trick?
It's called Little Trick, #1. Press their pulse. Seriously. The idea is, when you shake hands, you lightly position your forefinger so it rests on the other person's wrist vein, where you'd feel for a pulse.
Whoa, okay. Press their pulse. That sounds potentially a bit weird, maybe even a bit too intimate.
It does sound odd out of context, and yeah, subtlety is key. The source explains it like this. The pulse is seen as a wave from the heart. So this very light touch is framed as a way to metaphorically connect with their heart, creating a slightly deeper, perhaps subconscious sense of connection.
Huh.
And there's a practical side too. It apparently helps ensure the webbing between your thumb and forefinger meets theirs properly, which contributes to a good, firm handshake. They use an anecdote about Arturo Elias, who was president of GM Canada, apparently having this really memorable, impactful handshake, implying this might have been part of it.
So the emotional prediction is that this tiny physical act bypasses conscious thought and creates a feeling of being felt or connected with.
That seems to be the idea.
And
A subtle physical cue predicted to create a deeper connection.
okay, what about hugs? They can be super awkward territory.
Oh, absolutely. The source flags hugs as complex, even controversial territory in social or professional settings. It doesn't really say if you should hug, but focuses on how to use emotional prediction around hugs. The key is trying to sense the other person's likely comfort level before anything happens.
Like looking for signs they might hate hubs.
Exactly. The source literally mentions looking for terrified eyes in potential hug haters. You're predicting their negative reaction. Based on that prediction, you adjust. If you suspect they're not a hugger, maybe quickly offer a handshake first. Kind of a preemptive move.
A defensive handshake, I like it.
Yeah. And if they seem more open, you might signal openness with your body language, maybe open your arms slightly, but then you pause. You let them make the move to close the distance.
So you give them control.
Right. It's all about predicting their emotional boundary and respecting it. You prioritize their predicted feeling of comfort over your own impulse. It shows sensitivity.
That makes a lot of sense, making them feel safe and respected. Okay, what about eye contact? Another big one. People find it hard.
Super common difficulty. The source connects it to, like, primitive fight-or-flight stuff. A long, direct gaze can feel like a challenge. So it offers little trick #8, examine 8 characteristics. It's presented almost like a physical therapy exercise for your eyes.
8 characteristics. Okay, what am I supposed to be looking for? This sounds complicated.
It's actually about giving your brain something specific to do other than just hold eye contact. You focus on noticing details, like their eye color, but try to be specific, not just blue, but maybe slate blue or gray blue. Then their eye shape, how much white is showing, the distance between their eyes, eyelash length, symmetry, contacts maybe. And for women, perhaps details of their eye makeup.
So you're turning it into an observation task. How does that help with the awkwardness or the connection?
Well, first, giving your brain that task helps you maintain the gaze longer and more naturally because you're actively processing, not just staring blankly. But the emotional prediction part is deeper. People have this fundamental desire to be truly seen. By focusing on these specific details, you're unconsciously signaling that you are really looking at them, paying close attention.
Ah, okay, so they feel noticed.
Exactly. The prediction is that this detailed attention makes them feel genuinely acknowledged, significant, which is a huge self-esteem booster. The source even throws in this wild detail about a study where people who counted blinks during conversations supposedly developed stronger romantic feelings. Maybe because counting forced more focused gaze.
Huh. Okay, that's wild. So a technical exercise with an emotional payoff. Let's shift from the physical stuff to conversation itself. Business cards seems pretty basic, but there's a trick.
Yeah. Little trick, #4. Examine for conversation. The source contrasts say how a Japanese executive might respectfully study a card versus someone just stuffing it in their pocket. The technique is, take the card respectfully, glance at it then, sure. But the trick is to make a point of looking at it again later in the conversation.
Why look again? What's the point?
It's your lifeline if the conversation stalls. You look down at the card, and suddenly you have potential topics. The logo, their exact job title, what does that entail? A company slogan, maybe?
Yeah.
A photo. There's this relatable story about talking to an auto parts guy, running out of things to say, looking at the card again, and asking about the picture of a distributor cap. Save the conversation.
Ah, I see. So you're predicting a potential awkward silence, and you're using the card as your pre-planned escape route.
Precisely. And the ET element is that by showing that respect for their card, looking again, finding something on it to ask about, you're predicting they'll feel respected and that you're genuinely interested in them or their work, even the small details.
That makes sense. Okay, so that helps if you're stuck. But what about just starting a conversation, especially with someone new? That initial hurdle.
Yeah, it can be tough. The source leans into that idea that fundamentally people like talking about themselves. So, little trick, #11, ask about last few hours, suggest getting really specific about their immediate past. It comes from this story about someone named Cheryl Molstrom, who apparently made an instant connection by asking things like, what time did your flight get in? How was traffic? What time did your alarm go off this morning?
Really? Asking about their commute or their alarm clock? Isn't that kind of boring or intrusive?
You'd think so, but the source argues those details are on their mental windshield. They just happen, they're fresh, easy to talk about, requires almost no effort to recall. The emotional prediction is that asking about something so recent, even if it seems trivial, shows you're interested in their current reality, their immediate experience. It bypasses generic chit-chat and makes them feel seen right here, right now. Kicks things off smoothly.
Okay, that's a clever way to make it about them instantly. But what if the conversation starts and it heads somewhere you, frankly, don't want to be? Or it's just dull. How do you steer it?
Ah, the escape hatch. We need one of those sometimes. Little trick, #18, echo and link. This is about changing the subject smoothly without making the other person feel cut off. The technique is you pick up on a word or a core idea they just mentioned. You repeat it or rephrase it slightly. That's the echo.
Okay, so you acknowledge their point first.
Exactly. That's key.
Yeah.
The emotional prediction is that just jumping subjects makes people feel ignored. Echoing their thought first predicts they'll feel heard and respected. It creates this little mental bridge. Then you link that echoed word or idea to the topic you want to talk about. The source uses the example of someone talking about rain. You could say, yeah, this rain makes you want to stay inside and watch a good movie. Did you see? Or rain reminds me of trying to go horseback riding last spring. You use their word to pivot.
Got it. So it feels less abrupt, more like a natural flow. But is there ever a time when changing the subject is just the wrong move?
Definitely. And this requires really tuning into that emotional prediction. Little trick, #19, never change special subjects. This is the counterpoint. If someone is clearly having a special moment in the conversation, maybe they're receiving praise and beaming, like the story about Gunter getting complimented by the CEO, or like the Sarah's Kids example where someone is excitedly sharing something deeply important to them.
Then changing the subject would be like popping their balloon.
Exactly. The source calls it a pain prick.
Yeah.
You're predicting that this is a moment of high positive emotion or connection for them. Changing the subject is predicted to kill that vibe and make them feel diminished or unimportant. So even if you're not fascinated by their kid's soccer game, staying engaged, asking follow-up questions shows immense respect. It validates their feeling, showing their moment is more important than your agenda.
Wow. That really underscores the sensitivity aspect. Okay, let's switch gears a bit. What about the digital world? Email feels so much less personal.
It can be, for sure. But the source applies these EP principles there, too. Let's start with subject lines. Little trick, #32 and #33. Avoid scary, write, make them smile. It uses this cool analogy of Pavlov's dogs. People can get conditioned to feel dread or pleasure just seeing your name pop up based on your typical subject lines.
Right, like that story of getting an email that just said accident in the subject and feeling instant panic.
Yeah, exactly. That subject, even if the email content was fine, predicted a hugely negative emotional reaction. So rule 1, avoid ambiguity or anything that could remotely sound negative. Rule 2, actively use subject lines predicted to create a positive feeling. Great meeting you, or following up on our fun chat, or fabulous gift idea. Something that connects you with pleasure in their inbox before they even open it.
Like preloading a positive association? Makes sense. What about the email body itself? Sometimes emails can sound really self-involved.
That often comes down to using I too much, which leads to little trick, #34, delete most I's. Unlike spoken words that vanish, email text just sits there, saying I think, I need, I did, over and over, can make the sender seem self-centered.
So the fix is literally just cutting out the I's.
Pretty much. For informal emails, the source suggests trying to tweet them out, make them more concise, often removing the I. For more formal stuff, it's about rephrasing. Instead of, I will send you the report, try, you will receive the report, or the report will be sent. Put the focus on them or the action, not yourself. Use their name. Mr. Jones, your order.
Okay, so shifting the linguistic focus.
Right. The emotional prediction is that an I-heavy message makes the recipient feel secondary. Focusing the language on you or their name predicts they'll feel more central, more valued, more like a customer or partner. The example contrasting the two Mr. Jones order emails really highlights this.
It's subtle grammar, but a big psychological shift. What about making emails feel more personal, especially if you don't know the person well or it's been a while?
Good question. The source offers, little trick, #35 and #36. News weather check, put memories. Before hitting send, do a super quick search. What's the weather like where they are? Any big local news. Mentioning it shows you thought about their context. Hope you're staying warm with that snow you're getting.
Or looking back at old messages.
Yeah, scan your previous emails with them. Did they mention a trip?
Yeah.
A pet? Their kids? Referencing it briefly, hope your daughter's college search went well. Shows you remembered.
That takes a bit of effort, though.
It does, and that's exactly why it works, according to the source. The emotional prediction is that demonstrating you took even 30 seconds to check their weather or recall a personal detail makes them feel incredibly important, cared for. You're predicting that the effort itself signals value. You invested time thinking about them.
Okay, that makes sense. The effort communicates value. And finally for email, the sign-off. How do you end it well?
This one's really interesting, maybe the most counterintuitive. Little trick, #37, sign with their name. It comes from this anecdote about a cyber psychiatrist. Instead of ending with best or sincerely and your name, you end the actual message text with a sentence that includes their name, preferably as the last word.
Wait, end with their name, like, hope this helps, Sarah, and that's it. No, best, my name.
Pretty much. It feels weird, right? We're so used to signing off with our own name. But the source explains the psychology. Hearing or reading our own name is inherently pleasant. The emotional prediction is that ending the message on that sweet sound of their name leaves a subtle, positive final impression. It centers the closing thought entirely on them.
Huh, so it's like a final little gift of recognition.
Exactly. Creates a feeling of respect, friendliness. Your name or initials might be in your standard email signature anyway, or you might mention it earlier, but the very last word they read is theirs. Looking forward to hearing from you, David. Thanks again for your input, Maria.
Okay, that's definitely one to mull over. Let's pull back from digital now. One last real-time thing. The curse of the modern meeting. The cell phone interruption.
Ah, yes, the ultimate rudeness sometimes. The source tackles this with little trick, #39, let them hear you.
Hmm.
So the common advice is turn your phone off before a meeting. But this trick says, leave it on until you actually sit down with the person. Then, visibly and audibly, turn it off right there.
Make a show of turning it off. Why? Isn't that disruptive in itself?
It's about the demonstration. The emotional prediction is that in a world where everyone feels constantly interrupted, this conscious, visible act of silencing your device for them right then and there sends a powerful signal. You're predicting that this act will make them feel prioritized. You're saying you right here, right now, are more important than any potential call or message.
As opposed to turning it off beforehand, which they don't see.
Exactly. If they don't see it, it doesn't register as an act for them. The source contrasts it with this character, Marty the dot-com cowboy, whose phone was always buzzing, implicitly evaluating if the caller was more important than the person in front of him. Visibly turning it off is like a modern-day bow or salute. It's an act of deference that has impact because it's witnessed.
That's a really strong point. A visible act of prioritization. Okay, so wrapping this all up. All these techniques, handshakes, eye contact, conversation starters, email tweaks, silencing the phone, what's the big takeaway here?
It really all comes back to that core idea. Developing your emotional prediction skills and then acting with sensitivity. It's about getting better at anticipating how will this likely make them feel, and then consciously choosing the words or actions predicted to boost their self-esteem, to make them feel valued, seen, important, especially when they're interacting with you.
Right. And the source seems to emphasize that these aren't just isolated tricks, but part of creating an overall feeling. When someone feels you genuinely respect or prioritize them, these small acts land with even more weight.
Precisely. It's presented as a mindset shift towards really prioritizing the other person's emotional journey in the interaction. Applying these things consistently isn't just about manipulating situations. It's about building genuine connection through demonstrated empathy and respect.
This has been fascinating. Really digging into the source material reveals so much about the subtle mechanics of connection. It's clearly about more than just, being nice. It's about targeted sensitivity.
Yeah, it's about cultivating that deeper awareness and applying it. Not just tricks for tricks' sake, but tools built on an understanding of how to make others feel truly good.
So we'll leave you, our listeners, with a final thought to consider drawing from all this. If mastering this art of predicting how others will feel based on your actions and then consciously adjusting what you do to boost their self-esteem is the real key to forging deeper, more meaningful connections. How might starting to apply this principle today change things? Not just how others react to you, perhaps, but maybe how you fundamentally see and approach every single interaction you have.
Something to definitely think about.
Thank you for your support and for listening.